Hello party people and welcome to office hours in Kyoto, Japan. As a kind of dumb American, when I think of Japan, I tend to think of big bustling cities like Tokyo or Osaka, where people are packed in very tightly. It's lots of neon lighting, and there's things going on 24/7. Or the other extreme is quiet towns in the middle of nowhere with shrines and temples. And Kyoto is kind of like a mix between the two. From what I'm learning, was the only major city that wasn't bombed during World War II, so there's still a ton of historic buildings, shrines, just gorgeous locations, one of which of course is behind me, but usually when you walk into places like this, that's only the gate, and then there's tons of stuff in behind it. Just an utterly beautiful place to be. From what I've seen so far, I'd actually say that if you could only see one city in Japan and try and sample as much of the history as possible, it'd probably be Kyoto. It's absolutely gorgeous. So let's stop amongst the tourism stuff here for a minute, and let's go get to your top voted questions from PollGab. The top voted question is from, well, let me get it, hold on a second here, my phone timed out there. Let me go get back into the site. There we go. The top voted come on now. There it goes. The top voted question is from SQL Linux, who says, I have a server that has many tables using nvarchar max columns. Most of them only contain 80 characters or less. Will I see a performance boost by changing the size down from varchar max to something smaller? Generally speaking, no. There is one edge case where you will, which is around query memory grants. But over and over again, over and over on this webcast, over and over and over, you'll hear me ask the same question all together now. What's the problem that you're trying to solve? It's extremely unusual that I see someone's largest problem is high memory grants on queries. It's usually one of many problems. But instead of running into the webcast with a tool and saying, hey Brent, should I use this tool? Describe what the server's problem is. What is it that users are complaining about? Now, could users be complaining that nvarchar max is causing them problems? Maybe, but I doubt it. I don't think that's what users are complaining about. Next up, Josef asks, using SP database restore, is there a way to restore all of the databases from a backup location at once instead of handling them one by one? No, and I know that you're not the first person to want that, but if you would actually do the work to code it, you would actually be the first person who wanted it badly enough. Because for the rest of us, we just haven't wanted it badly enough to code it. It's something that we would welcome a pull request for. It's just that no one's wanted it badly enough to code it yet. Next up, Vineet asks, have you ever considered changing the office hours YouTube into a paid membership channel? No, and it's a really good question. I know that there are YouTubers out there who do it, but my feeling is that this office hours is a chance for people to get access to me for questions and answers in like a small bite-sized format without having to pay me. It's kind of, to some extent, a sales and marketing tool for the training classes and for consulting, that people recognize the difference between something small that you can get answered for free versus something big that you have to pay for in order to get access for. But people hire me for consulting all the time. So, and I get from people all the time go, well, I got a question. They try to send in a 2-page long thing via email. And I go, oh, well, here's how you get access to me for free. You can either post it on office hours or hire me for consulting. And they're like, well, it's something in between. I'm like, well, that would be consulting then. Okay, next up, Vishnu asks, we have developers that continue to run Management Studio directly on the production SQL Server despite being asked not to. Do you see any downsides to uninstalling SSMS from that VM? No, but what I would do first before you uninstall it is I would give them another VM where they can run Management Studio from. It's typically called a jump box, like you're going to jump into it and run queries from there, because they may have queries or processes that they need to run that'll take an extended period of time, and they're worried because they close their workstations and go home for the night or take their laptops home. So this is a way that they can run those long-running processes. Next up, Bandhu asks, what are your opinion of the new features in SQL Server 2025? Is there anything to get excited about? Well, see, the problem with that is for the last few versions, Microsoft has announced or shown things during the previews and then actually walked them back at release time. They haven't been an official part of the supported release. A couple of examples I can think of off the top of my head: availability groups on Kubernetes and Linux, and what was the one in 2022? Always on availability groups could fail over back and forth to managed instances. That one took them like 3 years to ship. So I tend to not get too excited about anything that they show in previews anymore, just because they've kind of burned those bridges. I will say I am excited for the ability to call a REST API from a stored procedure, mostly because I'm going to use it for things like ChatGPT. Believe it or not, yes, I will call ChatGPT from T-SQL. And I'll give you an example, is I actually want to code support for that into the first responder kit. I want the ability to show an index or to pass an index or table design over to ChatGPT and get advice, because I think it would be kind of cool. Next up, JRL says, what advice do you give to clients who ask about running graph queries? For example, do you suggest the use of specialized graph databases? Yeah, when you're going to store graph data, you're best off doing it really, and let's zoom way out. When I think about storing any kind of data, my first response is, how are you going to query it? Are you going to just pass in a key and get a value back? Great, in that case, we're talking about key value stores. Are you going to ask for relationships between several tables? In that case, you probably want it in a relational database. If you're going to do joins, for example. Graph queries typically want the relationships between a couple of objects like spaces or social networks, in which case you're not usually doing joins, you're asking about points or connections between people. And graph databases, there are options out there that are totally free, so whenever possible, I'd always suggest that someone use a free solution. In that case, I'd suggest to use that. When would I say to use SQL Server's built-in graph solutions? When you're shipping a third-party app, like you're shipping something that'll be installed on a client's servers, and you want to install as few database services as possible, and you need a little bit of graph stuff in along with a lot of relational things, then it can be nice to just have one instance of SQL Server for the customer to manage. They don't have to install a lot of complicated software, and they get a lot of bang for the buck there. Next up, Rondel says, what is your opinion of Azure SQL DB's ability to automatically create and drop indexes? Well, you want to read the documentation on that. It takes weeks or months in order to do those index creations. Same thing with the drops as well. So it's not something, usually people want performance improvements quicker than that. I think for something that's going to be landed at a company that has maybe one developer and no full-time DBAs, it's better than nothing, right? Like eventually over the course of months, the database will make itself somewhat incrementally faster. But usually at least for the people that I know, they want improvements a little faster than that. I was excited when they shipped it because I thought, oh cool, this will be the down payment of something really cool, and then they'll continue to evolve that over time. But they just haven't. It's something that they kind of shipped and checked the box and then never improved, so that's kind of a bummer. Rennie asks, what's the best time series database? I have no idea. You know, in I know when you talk to someone, it's easy to think that everything that they're silent about, they know a lot about it, like that they must be experts about that thing. That is certainly not the case with me. There are a few things that I know a lot about. I don't know jack about time series databases. Nothing. Let's see here. Next up, Double Dragon says, what is your opinion of the pending TikTok US ban? Again, it's one of those things with, I'm a big believer in the stoicism philosophy. Be aware of the things you can change and the things that you can't change, and don't lose sleep over the things you can't change. I have no concerns about the TikTok politics or US ban type stuff because I don't even know if it's going to happen. Who knows? Politics is like the weather. It changes all the time and there's not really a whole lot that you can do about it. So who cares? Next up, Chris says, I ran a query of sysdmdb index physical stats on a readable replica. It took over half an hour to run, and at that point the primary started performing poorly. Since the replica is in async mode, is it possible that the query could impact the primary? Yes. Workloads on secondaries, even asyncs, can slow down the primary. What I would ask instead is, what is it that you're trying to solve by querying physical stats? If you search for Brent Ozar fragmentation, you're going to see a whole new world of all kinds of videos and opinions there. I would question what it is that you're trying to solve, and when you learn about that problem, you may find that it's not nearly as important as you thought it was. And then we'll do one more. JRL asks, I recently attended AWS reInvent, oh yeah, in Las Vegas. And I was disappointed that a majority of the talk seemed superficial and marketing driven. Which tech conferences have you found rewarding in terms of technical depth and networking? So generally speaking, if sessions are only 60 minutes long, and there's no learning track, like there's no pathway that says if you watch these 5-6 sessions in a row, it'll go deep, then generally speaking, you're not going to find good technical depth there. I know that some conference organizers are going to say, that's not fair. We have really deep sessions. How long are they? 45 minutes? So in the span of 45 minutes, if you subtract out, a lot of speakers will spend 5 minutes introducing themselves and the topic. They'll allocate 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. At that point, you're down to like 30 minutes, and it's really hard to go deep. It's not impossible, but it's really hard to go deep in a way that satisfies attendees in that short period of time. Because a lot of attendees, what ends up happening is that they're not as experienced with that particular topic as they thought they were, and then they write bad reviews saying, I couldn't follow, it was hard to understand the speaker, or else they already knew the stuff. The abstract was pitched in a way that made it sound more compelling than they thought. And they're like, I already knew all of that stuff. Whereas if you spend a day-long session taking attendees through an entire journey on a topic, then maybe the first hour stuff that they already knew, maybe the last hour is stuff that's too hard and they can't keep up. I'll give you a great example. Bob Ward from Microsoft is a speaker who has a legendary reputation for going extremely deep. His sessions are often, his 400 level or 500 level sessions are often 2, 3, 4 hours long. And even at that point, when people know going in that it's a hard session, you'll often see people saying, I gave up like an hour in and I couldn't follow along. And I'm not saying his sessions are bad, his sessions are fantastic and I enjoy sitting through them. But if you want to go really deep, that's the kind of length that you should look for. I would also say that conferences tend to not be the best place to go deep. If you really want to go deep on a topic, you're typically better off finding someone's blog who's an expert on that topic and following a series of videos from them and a series of blog posts where they can take the time to go deeper. Now, you had two parts to your question. The other part of that was, let me get back into there. You said, what were they rewarding in terms of technical depth and networking? So while I don't go to conferences for technical depth, I do go for breadth to get exposed to a whole lot of topics. Which ones are good for networking? If you want to learn networking or if you want to do networking, a lot of times I don't even go to sessions at all. Like I'll go to a conference and just attend what we call the hallway track. Meet up with people before and after their sessions. I may make notes of where speakers are presenting and then go talk to them afterwards so that I have a longer access to them and we can talk more in detail about things, the vendor hall, etc. I find that all conferences are good for networking as long as you go in knowing that you're going to be walking around doing the hallway track rather than the sessions themselves. I would also be careful about if you think you're going to go to a organized dinner. That's usually fairly bad for networking because you're stuck next to the same people for extended periods of time. It's also like networking events can also be rough when if you stand next to the same people for extended periods of time. Set yourself a timer on your phone or your watch for like 5-10 minutes max, and after 5 or 10 minutes go say, all right, well, I got to go see so and so over there, I wanted to go meet so and so while they're here. Otherwise it's tough, but like I could spend an hour talking to a single person at a conference, but then you don't really get the value of networking amongst a large group of people. All right, well, that wraps up our office hours for today. I am going to go around today. We are going to one of the Kyoto Museums of Modern Art, and then right across the street is the Kyocera Museum of Art, and there's also a Museum of Photography here. We're doing kind of a museum day. And then going to the Leica store. There's a Leica flagship store here in Kyoto. So not a very local, I mean, it's art museums, which is kind of local, but not a very authentic Japanese experience, so to speak. I do really like the art here, though. But then tomorrow we'll be back to wandering around the Gion district, which is where all the geishas are at. Kind of cool. We were over there a lot yesterday and saw a lot of people in kimonos. It was really neat. So thanks for hanging out, and I hope you learned something, and I'll see y'all on the next office hours. Adios.